This is a meeting of the Cohasset Select Board. It is November 2nd, 7:01. We will conduct this meeting in person at the Senior Center, although we have two members that are joining us online, Mr. Creighton, Mr. Plex. So I'm going to do a roll call vote, starting with Mr. Plex.
Chris Plex here.
Thank you. Mr. Creighton?
He fell off.
Okay. Mr. Grady?
Present.
Ms. Marr?
Ellen Mar present.
Okay, Jean Haley Dibble present. I'd invite everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. All right. Is there any public comment? Is there anything on Zoom or Zoom World? Nothing? Okay, great. All right. Special town meeting, warrants, article discussion. Mr. Senior or Ms. Leary, is there any update that we need to discuss right now on anything relating to the special town meeting? Okay.
Other than what you already have on the
Yep,
warrant.
I just-
The agenda.
I just put that on as a straw man, just in case something came up, or placeholder, I should say. All right, so we are gonna move to, well, we're set to begin the affordable housing portion at 7:20. We're ahead of time at this point. I think I'm gonna try to wait until 7:20, given the interest in this. What I would suggest is we move to the approval of the minutes and town manager update. So let's start with the approval of the minutes. Would someone make a motion to move the approval of the minutes to right now?
Motion made.
Is there a-
Second.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second. Let's do roll call. All those in favor present, please say aye.
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 Mr. Plex? How do
Chris
you vote?
Plex, aye.
Thank you, Mr. Creighton. Okay, the record reflect Mr. Creighton has dropped off for now. All right, do we have any discussion about the minutes?
Do not.
Okay, this is October 3rd and October 10th.
No, October 10th and October 13th.
I'm sorry, October 13th and October 10th.
Yeah.
All right. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll
Make
make
a
a,
motion to approve.
All right, all those present at the senior center, please say aye if you'd like.
aye.
Aye.
All right, Mr. Plex?
Aye.
Okay, Mr. Creighton? Mr. Creighton is still not here, so we have 4 ayes and Mr. Creighton is not here. All right, 7:05. Mr. Senior, town manager update. Is there any update you would like to provide at this juncture?
So we are preparing, just to be safe, for extra seats on the floor for November 13th. We normally have about 300 on the floor. We're gonna try to get close to 500. We're gonna try to grab every chair that we can. Facilities is at work on getting every chair they can. The room itself will hold comfortably more than 1,000 people. So we don't think we need to go to any kind of satellite space. And I'm not saying that we know that we aren't that many people, it's just, we're just being safe. And IT is working to get some supplemental monitors placed a little bit deeper into the room to make it easier for people to see if there's anything up on the screens. So I think we're preparing well for that. So again, we're gonna have that extra capacity in case we need it. Now, I would really ask the people at home, remember to bring their warrants, because we don't have lots of extras of those. They were a very big warrant to print, so we didn't get quite as many overruns as we typically do. So we'll have extras, but there won't be a lot of them. So everyone will have a motion packet, that'll be available there, so that won't be a problem. But so we're just playing it safe, so we should have plenty of capacity in the room should we have a particularly large crowd. So,
Okay. And one question that I've gotten is how late will town meeting go? If you know, typically, my guess was, you know, around 10:30, it starts to get a little painful. I don't know, though.
It'll go as late as people want it to go. That said, I mean, again, it's hard to judge. This is gonna be a very full warrant. I would, you
So
know,
we'll play it by ear.
yeah, typically what happens is the moderator will ask at a certain point in the evening,
Yeah.
if there's still more to go, how the meeting feels, if it wants to continue or if it
Yeah.
wants to, you know, or if it wants to take a break or just power right through. I guess we'll have to see how it goes. So I had the very nice invitation of meeting with the old goats today, so I had lunch with them. They had lots of very good questions. I shared the one pager and I shared some, the financial report and, so that was a good conversation, so.
Back to special town meeting, I have just a quick question. In the event that we need to go to a second night, has the high school gymnasium been reserved?
My answer is yes, we always reserve a second night just in case.
Okay,
Because we have to leave everything set up. I mean, you know, we can't take it down and set it up again. So,
right, okay.
I mean, we've never had.
Yeah.
We haven't had to go a second night in a very, very, very long time. See how this goes. We'll see how this goes. So, so we're also, so all the prep is together. The warrant hit everybody's homes. That's all good. The constable's posted his return, so that's all set. The clerk is preparing information on the special town election is also out there now. There's information. Early voting begins, I want to say, next week. But there's information on the town website about that. And so there's an early voting opportunity for people who need that time during the week, coming during regular business hours. The opportunity for absentee ballot, you have to request one of those. Those will get mailed to your house. There's a fair number of people in town who have that automatic option set up already, so they've already gotten that ballot one out yesterday. So people should be getting them in the
We sent
mail,
out 1,500.
something like that. Yeah, I forget what the exact number is, but
That's
something like that.
that's the amount that signed up, I think.
Yeah, so anyone who signed up for the automatic vote at home will get those ballots. And again, do you have the flyer in front of you, Justin? When does early voting start? Is it this month? Is it next week?
Tell you about 20 seconds.
Okay, so, but again, everyone requested will be getting those ballots they may have started to get them at home as early as today. Because the clerk was gonna get them ready to be mailed starting yesterday. But all ballots have to be in by, I think, the close of the election that night. So there's no, you know, you have to be physically in the hand of the clerk or their machines by 6 p.m. the night of the election, the 18th. So, but there's plenty of opportunities for people who cannot, again, there's that whole week, and I believe I think it's the week before the election. Is that it?
So I've got vote by mail and in-person absentee voting. So vote by mail, the deadline to apply is Monday, November 13th. The deadline for returning vote by mail ballots is 6 p.m. Saturday, November 18th.
Right.
And then in-person absentee voting, they're available in the town clerk's office, normal business hours between Monday, the 13th and Friday, November 17th by 12 noon.
Okay, so starting of the week of town meeting, that whole week, people can come in and vote during regular business hours. So people don't have to wait till Saturday if they don't want to. So, but you can also request an absentee ballot in person at the clerk's office. You can do that now, starting now. So. And I think, you know, I think I've updated you on the grants. And
Are there any town hall building repairs we
well, I
should
will say the
discuss?
heat failed in the annex this week. The boiler's not the problem. The boiler's not the problem. It's the circulatory system that's the problem. So the historic structure actually has heat, but the annex does not. And they've had to get a special part for it, which we hope will come in the next couple of days. That the unit is past its useful life. And, so it's really just cold. If it got much colder, then we'd be worried about pipes freezing. We wouldn't want that to happen. So it's going to be a touch and go thing all winter, I think. So.
Yeah. Well, and I know one question that I've gotten a lot is what's the cost to repair the existing town hall? And I looked back at the information in my inbox from the Town Hall Building Committee, and we actually have it on the Town Hall Building Committee's webpage under an FAQ, which comports with my recollection, which is when we had our CRM, our construction risk manager, do the estimate, it was 18 to 19 million, and that was back last year. And that doesn't include all the upgrades we need to make for code purposes, including like egress, et cetera. So my guess is probably 20 million at this point, just given escalation of costs. So everyone who keeps getting that question, FYI, we got an estimate last year, it was approximately 18 to 19 million, not including code upgrades, et cetera. Just for those who are wondering and watching. So it's 7:12 right now. I would ask the audience, do you expect any more members from your committee or trust to come? No? No? Okay. Okay. Because we can start early, but I don't want to deprive anyone of the opportunity on this agenda item either. So why don't we just start early? If someone would like to make a motion to move the affordable housing update to 7:13,
I'll make a motion to move the affordable housing component to 7:13.
is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor present, please vote aye.
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 Mr. Plex?
Aye.
Mr. Creighton?
Aye.
Okay, great. Let the record reflect Mr. Creighton is back.
For now.
So we are dealing with the topic of the affordable housing questions at One Pleasant Street. Namely, we're considering a restriction and or covenant relating to One Pleasant Street, including in the context of the recent CPC meeting. Mr. Grady, you're our CPC rep. Do you want to provide?
Jean,
Yep.
I'm sorry to
I'm sorry.
interrupt, but before we get into this, should we talk about the conversation I had with council today?
Sure, please feel free to.
So I did have a conversation with Carolyn today, and we discussed the possibility of my being considered an abutter to the property at One Pleasant Street, because although I don't share a border with that property, I'm close enough that it could be perceived as an issue. And this is already a hot enough issue for town meeting. So Carolyn advised that there are two options to make sure we prevent any perception of bias on my part. One is to get an opinion from a real estate professional in town that my property value has no relationship to any of the issues under discussion for One Pleasant Street. So that's option A, and that would confirm that I have no financial interest in the issue, according to Carolyn. And the second option is that I could recuse myself from any further discussions on One Pleasant Street. And Carolyn said it might also be a good idea to ask the board to reaffirm our votes on the issue so that I might abstain. And Caroline emphasized that this is really out of an abundance of caution, considering how much discussion there's been on this issue. So, Jean, if this is the appropriate time, I would like to recuse myself and also ask the board to reaffirm our votes on the issue so that I might abstain.
Okay. We'll have, sorry.
Chris, you don't want the option A?
Paul, I might pursue option A in parallel so that I
Okay.
could participate in subsequent conversations. But this might be a case where belt and suspenders is the way to go.
Fair enough.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And we can discuss voting, including on the town hall warrant article for the next meeting. We have to remember to put that on the agenda because it's not on the agenda right now. All right. Okay, so Mr. Plex, if you're going to recuse, if you want to shut your video off, I will email you or text you when we're done. Mr. Grady, would you like to
What would you like to start?
provide a brief update as to CPC and what happened on Monday as our CPC rep?
Well, I'm sure people are aware that CPC unanimously voted to fund $1.3 million for 4 units on One Pleasant Street. There was some pushback to that, and so CPC was reconsidering their vote. I'll on as a CPC member. I did not agree with that. There were 2 votes that were in that camp. So we're looking tonight at different options.
Well, in CPC,
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
the options that they were discussing were whether the town would be willing to propose new application terms, including restrictions for additional units beyond the 4 that are already restricted as a condition of the permit.
4 restricted.
And if so, at what income category? CPC can only go up to 100.
They can go up to 100, and basically they left it to the select board and input from everybody else as to what formula we may or may not come up with. Be it up to 100%, how many units, and leave the 80 as is, or all 8. There's a number of different options in there, so I mean, I could spin the Rubik's Cube all night, but I think it's something that we've got to discuss, all of us.
Is there anyone from the audience who would like to make a comment?
I'll go. Today I said.
They need to identify
Oh,
themselves.
and if you could please come up, because people can't hear. We're learning from the
Here's my cough drop.
from the chairs.
Susan Sardina, 100 Pine Street, number 56. As I sent an email to Jean this afternoon, I had a lengthy conversation today with a man who works with the Community Preservation Coalition, because I wanted to try to understand a couple of things. I wanted to understand how CPC funds can actually be used for affordable housing, and what the AMI, which is the area-wide median income maximum limit, is for Cohasset. There is actually, I should have brought it up. There is actually a page on their website which breaks down every town across the state, Commonwealth, Great Commonwealth of Massachusetts, with what the AMI is for a family of 4. For Cohasset, it is $149,300. So that is the AMI that you would be working with for the additional units, not the initial 4 that are already set aside. That's 80%. So
A family of 4.
that's correct. So that would be the figure for the income that the select board could work with in terms of however many units you would opt to deed for. That's what's considered moderate income. To the CPC, their primary objective is to create additional affordable housing. And that falls into 2 categories: low-income housing and moderate income housing. The low-income housing being the 80% of AMI, the moderate obviously being the 100%. They do not approve, and it is not allowed for funds to be used for more than that. But that's a fairly decent number to work with. So if that's the figure that you're working with for the additional units, you could designate, it has been expressed through the board that the desire is to make the units, all 9 extra ones, available as much as possible to as many people, whether it's workforce, seniors, whatever. So this is the figure that you'd be working with. So you could opt to designate, if you're asking for $1.3 million, you can designate indeed that all 9 additional units, or 6, or whatever the figure is that you choose to work with. I don't know how one determines rent. I'm not privy to that. I'm not a realtor. I have no idea how that works. So I don't know how you determine what the rent would be for the units that are the 80%, the ones that are the 100%, and then if you have all of them, additional ones, 100%, what that would be. Or what it would be, for market rate. And I don't know what you feel the town needs to earn in terms of income from this to maybe make everything work. But that's the information that I have for you, which hopefully will help you in your discussions about where you want to go forward. Clearly, the CPC, both in Cohasset and statewide, prescribes that their funds are to be used for additional housing units. That's where the first 4 don't count. That's why it would need to be whatever additional you prescribe.
Questions?
That's from the horse's mouth, so.
What is it? I just want to clarify. Susan, you're on CPC?
Not now.
Yeah,
I
I know,
was for 15 years, yeah,
but you're not now.
correct.
Oh, okay, so you're not a member of CPC. When you got those figures, you gave it for a family of 4.
Hmm.
What about 2? What
I
it
don't
is?
have that. I don't have that. I got this by calling the CPC directly, in Boston to find out, because I've heard different figures thrown around. I've heard whether or not it had to be Norfolk County, which is not what the CPC told me today. And I frankly would go with what the body that has been entrusted with overseeing the CPA.
So would I.
So that's what I would assume that you would want to work with.
Great.
Just wanted to know
Because
what
here's
it
the
was.
chart. I will pass it on to you.
We have copies.
The board already
Thank you.
has all of this.
Oh, okay, yeah, it's tiny print. In mine, it was like, oh.
Thank you, Ms. Sardina. So
Okay.
I will tell you that the board has copies of this chart, and
Oh, okay.
Cohasset, the 80% limit for one person is 83,608.
That's actually a different thing. What he explained to me today, this is very confusing in this chart. I'm sorry to interrupt you a little bit, but I looked at this and I interpreted this as that these are all the figures you work with for approval for to live in the housing that's provided. This is actually a dual purpose chart from the way he described it to me. Unbeknownst to me, I hate to say this, 15 years on CPC, I did not realize that for seniors, if you noticed at the top in this teeny tiny print, these are figures that apply to a household that opts to, with a 60 or older age bracket, opts to elect out of the CPA tax. So what that essentially means is that for a family of 1, 2, up to 8, if they meet these dollar figures and they're over 60, they can opt out of the CPA tax. That's what this applies to. This is not a figure that applies to the housing. So apparently that's a different chart. I tried to call the mass housing something else. Okay, maybe you've got a
I
different
just want
chart.
to share with you what we're looking at.
This is the same thing. And where's Cohasset? Yeah, and it's 83.6. Let me see, that's what this is. This is so tiny. So maybe you got something different.
This is different. So this is, I think, if we adopt the senior provision at the,
Okay.
for 6 years, I think that's if we adopt the senior
Yeah,
provision.
so I have a different chart from what
Yeah,
you
so
have.
these are just if the
Okay.
CPA funds, but you can hold on to these.
Okay,
Because
that's great.
They're bigger.
Yeah, he didn't direct me to this, so I had not seen that.
We're looking at a different,
Two different charts. Okay, yeah.
Hopefully.
One that I have is really applying to people who elect to opt out.
Yeah.
For seniors who want to remain in their home and want to opt out from the tax. So that's a different figure.
okay.
Good question.
I know. And I never knew that.
I'm sorry. I didn't-
I'm through. If you're through with me, I'll go sit.
All right, thank you.
Am I dismissed?
Thank you, Ms. Sardina.
Sure.
So currently, the makeup is 5 one-bedroom units.
and 8 two-bedroom
Okay.
units. So you're not likely to have families of 8.
Or 4.
No, so,
Or 4.
yeah, so it's typically, it's how the bedroom count plus 1 is the occupancy rate. For the 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms, it's typically a family, so it's occupancy, it's bedrooms plus 1. In the event of a family, you max it.
You have one question when if you're ready.
Who's that?
Mr. Tom Rear
They won't be,
has his hand.
they won't be.
Sure.
Tom, you're just unmute yourself, please.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, yes, Mr. Reardon, you are. Yep.
I just wanted to add a little bit to what Paul described as the summary of our meeting earlier. And that is that there are 2 issues that I think the committee is concerned about. One is the CPC funds should be used to expand the affordable housing base, the number of units in the town. And that the original proposal as presented by the town did not do that. The second is that whatever expenditure we make should be based on an independent appraisal of the property, unit by unit, not by square footage of the building, but what are these units worth, so that CPC knows what they're buying and what they are paying for. It's not complicated, and it's consistent with the regulations of CPC and a desire to try to help this overall project.
Thank you, Mr. Reardon.
A pleasure.
Mr. Jeffers, I know you wanted to.
Come up to the big seat.
Yes, please do.
Rob Jeffries, 18 Spring Street. So no, I just did some research and I wanted to share with you as you guys make your decision on this. Spoke with Medford. They have some housing and stuff and just things to keep in. I asked them, what do we need? What are we not thinking about? What are we not worried about? One of the things that they did tell me is it is a little bit more complicated. You know, people kind of sometimes underestimate what it takes to manage a property when you're first going into it. Once you start doing it, it gets a lot easier. But when you're new to it, what she mentioned was, yes, you can get property managers. Yes, you can get people like MCO, and they're going to help with a lot. But there's really 3 different ways that towns kind of deal with the overall management. Some of them do them in-house. So you might decide you would need somebody working in the town who has a really good knowledge of it. One of the things to keep in mind is you do have to, obey all the fair housing laws. So like examples, when I mentioned that, we're going to have a government building and people in the same place, is like, you couldn't really use this as a polling station. You might never want to use this as a polling station, but you can infringe on the residents' rights to have political signs and things like that. She also said this is a good way to get sued. So you want to make sure that you're really, really consistent. We're talking about, teachers and police officers and stuff like that. If they don't pay their bills and you say, well, we're not going to evict them because they're the police officer, and then you evict somebody else, you're getting sued. So it's like, we just need to be really, really careful. The other thing, she goes, what a lot of towns do, because they don't want to get into this whole business, is, they might go to the housing authority and ask them to take it on, or they might partner with a nonprofit and do a land lease. The reason I mention these 2 things is for this discussion. I think you want to be careful about boxing yourself in. So if you, deed restrict these, at town meeting, you can't undo it, right? So it's like, and if you don't have a clear path of exactly how these are going to be managed, like let's say you decide that you want to partner with a nonprofit, but that nonprofit is only going to do it if it can do all of them and you meet their requirements. And we don't even know what those requirements are. And if you deed restricted it some other way, it's just something you need to keep into account. If you want to use the housing authority, they probably all need to be at 80%, if that's a group that you're going to do. So I bring that up, not as to advocate for anything one way or the other, but more If this passes, this is a whole new business venture we're getting into that we haven't done before as a town that I'm aware of. And I think you want to try to give yourself as much flexibility as possible so that you're not backed into some corner and then all of a sudden we're hiring tons of people to manage this thing. Any questions?
Very fair assessment.
So do the units have to be deed restricted at onset, or can they be deed restricted sometime down the road?
So there's nothing stopping you from anybody to, putting a deed restriction on any house at, any point in time. Now, I don't know that you'd have to talk to your lawyers about whether you need to go to town meeting to do that again. I have no idea on.
You can't undo it.
Right, well, they're done in perpetuity.
Right.
And when the world ends, I guess you can do it then, but perpetuity is a long time. Usually, I mean, there might, and that's just where you would need to get legal. I'm not a lawyer in this. There's some, there are things where they do them for 20 years, 30 years. I don't know how that works, but.
I think the city of Boston does 30 years.
Yeah, so there are some things like that. I mean, for the CPC discussion, it needs to be, any of those things are in perpetuity. But in general, you can put other types of deed restrictions on it.
And would putting deed restrictions on any of the units preclude us from some point down the road of saying, okay, we don't want to be in the landlord business, we want to sell these as condominiums?
You can sell them, but the deed restriction doesn't go away.
You still have the
Have
deed
that.
restrictions,
Yeah.
so you have to,
Right, so
How it's
it's,
set up.
yeah.
so that would mean it would have to be, it would have to be sold at there's a price. Yeah, so the thing that we're doing for Habitat for Humanity over, there's a price that's based on the income, ranges that it can be sold for. And they can get a mortgage on it and all stuff like that. But if you wanted, that's another thing that people do is, you go into an HOA, which kind of gets you away from it. The biggest risk in all of this is getting sued. Nothing's going to stop people from suing us, right? They can do that no matter what. We don't want to lose it though when we get sued. And so that's where you just have to be really careful. Now, an HOA could kind of help shield the town from stuff like that.
We could operate the remaining 9 in any way we wish in terms of 80% or 100% without deed restriction, correct? Because we set the market price. We do the tenant, well, not we, but a property manager would do tenant selection. Just seems like doing a deed restriction really limits us in options in a brand new venture that we haven't, done before.
Well, this was why when we went before CPC originally, we were reluctant to agree to a deed restriction, particularly where we're still trying to work through what's the right calibration for workforce housing on AMI, for
Right.
example.
Right.
And we have some additional information that we can talk about on that point, but it was a concern exactly of what Mr. Jeffers is bringing up of tying the town's hands too quickly, notwithstanding our intent to try to do this, given that we're the first ones ever doing it, that we wanted to give ourselves some breathing room on this one.
Right.
I'm sorry, Mr. Grady.
No, I was just following up to,
I mean-
right. That's why we were looking at some
Yeah.
room.
Another option, as you think about, and I'm not advocating for anything, I want to be clear, is, there's nothing, so let's say you just do it to 4, you don't ask for the CPC money now, but you decide to deed restrict in the future, you can go ask the CPC at that point in time. It's like, I believe you can.
Mhm.
Because that would be they'd be paying to turn for that deed restriction.
And that's where I believe we absolutely can do that through town meeting. It would be a CPC recommendation. It would just be like in the normal course of business of town meeting. Let's say a year from now, after we've got units up and going and we have some comfort about what the right AMIs and mixes and the demand, we could take a look and then make a decision at that point, including what we think the money is that we might need to operate these, or to, let's say, have an amount that goes to the payment for that unit. We could do something like that in the future, if we were so inclined.
That would probably be predicated on how the building's managing itself, I will assume. how we set it up. Again, we're trying to do it so we do it right.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of pieces, as we all know.
Yeah, I mean, it's
I
like,
know we could go back to CPC.
yeah.
I'm just saying that if the building is doing what we are hoping that it will,
Mhm.
then we're basically on our own.
Mr. Creighton?
Yeah, this kind of plays to some of my professional strengths. We don't want to manage these. There are nonprofits that manage a lot of limited partnerships, variety of things with subsidized, non-subsidized, deed restricted. They know this, so we really want to find them. I think it's worth everybody knowing in the town and CPC that when we first looked at that as a select board, one of the attractions was that we in fact would be able to control the additional units above and beyond the 4. And it was our intent to figure out a way in which we could reserve them, in some way make them available to seniors, to workforce housing, to police, fire, teachers. Now, it is a very difficult and legal minefield. And Mr. Jeffries is quite correct that the landlord-tenant world is full of lawsuits, and we want to protect the town from that. However, our intent, and I think, and I speak, I've heard every member of the select board clearly state from the beginning, and one of the real attractions for this select board for this particular building, aside from the fact that it's a great deal for the town hall, was the ability to add to our affordable housing inventory in whatever manner we can. It does appear that, according to Mr. Jeffries, and I wholeheartedly agree with him, that to do the details of that at this time is not practical. So I don't think we can, in good conscience, accept a not thought through restriction on the rest of the units right now, because we're not ready. We don't have the facts. If it means that CPC is going to change their vote and say they're not going to do the 1.3, that would be extremely unfortunate. But if they choose to do that, that is their decision. We can't do that. So, I mean, that really is up to them. But I do think that, number one, we do as a select board want to go forward with the other units, the 9 other units, and figure out a way to do it. But we're not in a position where we can make that permanent restriction now. It's just fraught with legal minefields.
Thank you, Mr. Creighton.
I think Justin has. Did you have someone who wanted to say something, Justin?
No, I was just letting you know that.
Oh, okay, I'm
Okay,
sorry. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else in the audience? Not that Mr. Jeffries.
No, nobody else.
Okay.
No, you're allowed
No,
to.
Feel free to stay here if you like.
Hang with us for a bit.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So Michelle graciously ran some numbers for us with respect to just looking at our town workforce to figure out what the different brackets may be. And what we've learned is approximately 178 employees would qualify for the units in a one-person household. So you just have one person, right, in a one-bedroom, at 80%. So that's 178 out of 359. Now, we don't know if these 178 employees also have a spouse that makes X amount that would, push them over the limit, which at 80% would be, for 2 household, 95,000. So if you have someone, for example, making 80,000, if they have a spouse making more than 20,000, then they're over the limit, right? And so that's how it works.
Don't forget about seniors.
I'm not forgetting about seniors, I'm just talking about our workforce, and what the numbers reveal. At 100%, so the 100% moderate income limit is 104,510. And we have 261 employees that have an income below 104,510. If, however, they had a spouse or significant other, that person could make no more than 20,000, or else they would not be qualified for a two-person household, because that limit is 119,440. And then the remaining 98 employees make above 100%. And so one thing that we were looking at was there are some towns that actually go up to 140% AMI for workforce housing. And Michelle, I know you're nodding. You want to provide the additional info we found?
No, so there's other communities out there that go as high as almost 200% AMI, and for their workforce housing, if you will. We've contacted them to find out exactly how the system works, and very similar to what you just said about Bedford.
Yep.
They share the same feelings with us, just to make sure the property is managed well. You have to take into account turnover. You have to make sure it's fair and equitable for everybody. Fair housing really does come into play, so you have to make sure that if you're renting to a firefighter or a police officer, that you're not discriminating against a teacher or so on and so forth. So it really comes down to our policies and making sure our policies are tight, and actually the person managing the property is adhering to all of our policies. And there is kind of that we are going to need someone to actually watch over that to make sure that that's being done. Anything, right? You can't just hire a property manager and make sure that and expect
And
them
walk away.
to.
And I think that's the key point that she was making. It's like, we can't go, oh, they didn't do what we told them. You are 100% on the hook for what actually happened, not what you intended to happen. And also you're mentioning policies. Somebody's got to write these policies. Somebody's got to put these together. And I think kind of as Jack was mentioning, there are nonprofits that do this, but I don't think we're really in, I'm sure the Affordable Housing Steering Committee as well as the trust would be willing to help look and find those, but we're not going to do that by next week. That's not no reasonable, but it's tricky. Something to consider is, if you don't want to have to keep going back and forth to town meeting, is if you do make a change to what you're doing, using the word may, it's like, the select board may restrict, these in the future. So they give you a little bit more flexibility if you know that that's something that you want to do. But there's tricky bits here with this. Way out of my depth here on the fair housing. It's like, yes, you can set the price to absolutely anything, but you can't discriminate unless you have a special, setup. And even with all of these, preferences, there's still other preferences that go in front of them. There's certain disadvantaged groups in the state that if they apply, you can't, use your preference. It gets very complicated, and you're going to need, if it's going to be us, you are going to need somebody who really, really understands this stuff so we don't get in trouble. And you're going to need a fair housing lawyer on retainer, as every one of these policies is going to have to be, reviewed and read and, by one of them.
And we do have lawyers who represent some many communities, but in particular, some that currently do workforce housing right now. So we've been navigating with them, but I take your point about the need for the risk management structure in place ahead of time. So I guess I would ask my fellow board members, I know how Mr. Creighton feels about the deed restriction. How do you feel?
Disgusting. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. How do you feel? Do you have any feelings about the CPC request to deed restrict? And
I do. I think it puts us in a very difficult spot because it doesn't give us any flexibility, whereas deed restriction goes on in perpetuity. And like you said earlier, this is the first time. And so when you do something for the first time, you don't want to have a very narrow lane in which to navigate. You want to make sure you have as many lanes open to you as possible so that you can move, as you need to move. I respect what CPC is trying to do, and I respect their input. But I think for the town, as a citizen, if I were looking at this from the outside and we get into this and it's deed restricted and we can never have it changed, that worries me.
How do you feel, Mr. Grady?
Well, I'll say I'm disappointed in what happened with CPC. I understand some of the rationale. I like the first, I don't mind restricting the 4. But I think with something as new as this, and I'm actually took a lot of what Mr. Jeffers had to say, is, and thank you, Rob. This and what Ellen, and this is a brand new thing. It's new for this town. It's something untried. And again, what the board is trying to do, without being long-winded, we were actually trying to genuinely preserve Cohasset by bringing something to the town that has the potential to take care of itself and include the workforce elderly in a lottery system or something like that. But there are hurdles. So if we do tie ourselves to, demands put upon us by the board, the commission, because I thought that we were trying to preserve Cohasset. But in that light, it doesn't seem to be the case. But I don't think that we should have our hands tied as to what we do with the property in the future. I would say that we are going to leave the building affordable. We're going to make it fair and try to make it an equitable, positive situation that is that's a benefit to the whole town. So I would have to go with that. Right now, I'm not a fan of locking our hands down because it's too new, it's too untried, and we are going to probably make some mistakes along the way. But hopefully they iron themselves out in a very short period of time. And then people can look back and say, gee, that's a heck of a project. So that's our hope. I'll leave it at that.
I have one more comment. And I just want to make sure we keep talking about workforce housing and we have, a substantial, I couldn't do the math in my head quick enough of how many employees we have, but right now they all have housing. And I don't know if we've done any polling to see how many would be interested in these 9 units or not. But I like the term local preference better, whether it's, I told Mr. Senior, I had a senior citizen call me already about it, who wants to get out of their 3-bedroom house and with this, widowers. So I think if it can be expanded beyond workforce, inclusive of workforce, seniors, veterans, local preference, I think it has much more appeal. And, I don't know if I would have to recuse myself. I do have a family member that is a town employee. Not that he'd be looking for working there, but I don't know if that's a conflict.
I think we all know someone who's a town employee, so I think we'd all be recused if we
Yeah, no, my son's a teacher in the public school, so I
they
have,
started to vote.
yeah.
I would agree with that. I do like the local preference. I like the wording, but I like it all. I just think it is something that I personally believe in the project. So again, I just don't think that we should by what I'd say. I'm not disappointed in that.
So it sounds like the sense of the board is that we don't want to do further deed restrictions at this juncture because we are trying to start up a local preference program where we're trying to preserve flexibility as we work through that, including when it comes to AMI. If we restrict now with respect to AMI, we may limit options, including partnering with a nonprofit in the future, which may make sense for the town, or other options we have. And so we want to maximize that flexibility, which I agree with too. So if that's the case, then where we are right now with CPC is we do have on the warrant an existing CPC has an existing recommendation on the warrant. And we've already had all the committees vote on it. It's out there. I suppose procedurally what would happen is CPC would make a motion to withdraw their recommendation at town meeting and explain why. Is that how that would play out, Mr. Senior?
That's one path.
What's the other one?
Another path I think could be that the select board withdraws its application. I'm just saying that that's.
Okay, what's the other path?
It's, and then CPC, and then it comes off, and then the motion that gets in front of town meeting is no more of an ask. I mean, so that said, the public now has it this way, so no one's gonna know, right? So the danger with that is that no one's gonna have heard any of that, and all of a sudden the motion will be very different. So someone's gonna have to explain what happened. I mean, it's legally allowed to do that. It would be surprising to people, I think, to have that change. Because it's really, I mean, I know there's some people watching us now, but the whole town
Yep.
is not watching us like the warrant got into people's hands.
Can I ask you a question?
No,
Hold on, Mr. Creighton.
Okay.
Hold on, Mr. Grady, please. And then we'll get to you, Mr. Creighton.
the warrants are already in people's mailbox, right?
They're already in people's hands.
All right. So my concern with that is we come up before town meeting, and it's put on the select board. The select board made their recommendation. We made our ask. And it was approved, and then things changed. So I don't think with the board in front of the public withdrawing a motion. I'm just saying that. I think if CPC wants to withdraw the motion, I think that's a fair play. Then they can explain why, they can explain there's nothing wrong with it. But that would happen in the course of 2 events when that came up. Am I incorrect?
I think I'm just thinking logistically, right? So the moderator's preference, and it works for town meetings, that things as clean going in as possible, right?
Yeah.
So a motion could be drafted such that it implements what's in the warrant with an understanding if somebody gets up, you can just strike a section of it or something, right? To make it easy. Just strike line 2 or something, right? That might be the simplest answer, Paul, because it'll be in front of people in the form that's in the warrant. And then CPC would get up and say, well, we've withdrawn our recommendation for this. And we were asking to change the motion.
I understand what you're saying. My insistence is on this, is that we're as transparent as possible going in front of the town. That's what I want to see.
Yeah. And that's what
The
happened.
hows, the whys, the machinery behind it. Because someone just coming to town meeting or seeing it on 143 or something like that, for any small reason, could feel they're being led down the garden path. And so it should be as clearly spelled out to everybody as to why and what happened. Since the warrants, as I said, are in people's mailbox, they're reading it. As to why we're making any changes that we're not. That's all.
Can I ask a question now?
You can ask a question, Mr. Creighton, and then I'm going to recognize Ms. Marr and then Mr. Reardon.
Okay. It was unclear to me whether in fact CPC withdrew that motion or they discussed it. Because as I understand it, if they were to withdraw, they would have a motion, they would have to a motion to reconsider made by somebody who voted in favor. That's Robert's Rules of Order. I don't know if that happened. I'm not sure that they voted against it. And I'm not sure that when they see, but I'm sure they're watching what we're doing, they may say, it's okay. I would be nice if they would see as a result of our actions that in fact we are committed to making it as affordable, and we're not opposed to it. We just want to make sure it's done right. So I don't know whether they're going to, withdraw it or not. And I don't know if they have or not.
So Mr. Creighton,
They made the motion.
Mr. Reardon is on the phone and he can clarify. I believe they did make the motion, but before we get to Mr. Reardon, I just.
Have Mr. Reardon.
Okay, Mr. Reardon, I saw that you raised your hand. Please feel free to weigh in.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
In terms of the process, that the original vote was unanimous on the part of the committee. Then in the meeting on Monday, the question was raised as to whether it would be reconsidered. And on a 6-2 vote, it was voted to be reconsidered. The person who put that forward originally voted in the affirmative. So I think that was addressed. The only point I wanted to make on this is that I am, as a person who will be charged with explaining this situation to the town at town meeting, I'm happy to do that. I think it could seem divisive. I think it could be counterproductive. I think something that says that the board wants to keep flexibility and to determine how it wants to allocate these units. We are bound by state law to certain prescriptions on how this money can be used. So I think that if we want to get into a he did, she didn't kind of thing, that would be unfortunate, I think, but I'm perfectly prepared to do that. But I'd prefer to see a united front that says the board needs more time to consider how it wants to consider the whole funding of this and the use of these units in relationship to that.
Thank you, Mr.
Well, I think
Reardon. Jack, Ms. Mars next, please. Okay, Ms. Mars.
So on that vein, another option, and I'm not advocating for it, but just another option is, the initial ask was 1.3 million. And we've heard from the Affordable Housing Trust about, that money should be for newer units, in the future. Could there be a reduction in the amount? Is there an agreeable reduction from the 1.3? I don't know, where it doesn't use up that money all from CPC now. But I don't know, just a thought. I'd like to negotiate so that we compromise, we get to a place of yes from both boards, so that we go to town meeting, and whether the warrant article is amended to either be stricken for that portion or reduced, both the select board and the CPC get to a place of yes together, because I think that's important. So I would say if there's an amount, if CPC needs to meet again, to say, okay, 1.3 million for 4 is a lot, but we would entertain this, whatever, I think we should listen to that.
Senior.
So if, again, please correct me if I'm remembering this. My understanding, CPC meets next Wednesday, so the select board meets again on Tuesday before they meet. And they were looking for the select board to come back with something. And in that vein, Ms. Marr, I was thinking, again, I don't want to start, I mean, it's a dangerous time to spitball stuff, right? The motion could simply read, the CPC recommends up to 1.3 million based on future agreements with the select board on additional affordability or something. So the money's still available if a decision is made at some point in a certain amount of time to deed or do something like that. I mean, that might be one way of doing it. It may never happen, but it may. So but again, that's something I think you probably would like some options written down so you can talk about them more next Tuesday. Because we have to net stuff on council too to make sure we're doing things in a good way.
Yeah.
So it could stay much the same as it is, with the understanding that the caveat is that it wouldn't go into effect without an agreement between the two boards or something.
Could we table the motion until Springtown meeting, once we have a chance to flesh out the details and talk further with CPC?
You could table one element of a motion too. I mean, it hasn't, yes, you could, that's another option, is just to table that one recommendation for a future.
Because we might find that, and we'd have to talk with council about, I think Mr. Kearse brought this up, that we are seeking some CPC money towards the startup of the property management and associated costs with the 4 deed restricted units that clearly qualify as affordable housing. No one's disputing that. As we, start to staff up, so to speak, as we consider the bigger picture of whether and if we restrict anything further. And so procedurally, could we do something like that?
Yeah, I mean, you could simply ask for a smaller amount of money to formalize those units, because it is going to cost.
Yeah.
There's got to be a process for that, right? To both to deed them and also to set them up for occupancy. So with a lottery and all those other things. So I think the CPC could fund that at a slower some number. I just don't know what that number would be. It could be a couple $100,000. I think Mr. Keir threw out a number of like $200,000. Something like that might work. I mean, mean,
You may borrow 200,000.
no, they contribute a smaller number towards the original 4 units. That's another, again, we're just spitballing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So how does, Mr. Grady, I feel like you want to say something?
No. Good. What I would say is this. I'm not averse to any compromise, but I will say that we left $800,000 in CPC. And what we're borrowing is the spirit of community preservation. And that was where we went, because we're looking at keeping all of the units affordable, even though I'm going to repeat, they add to the stock, but any building owner did not have to do that. We would have written them in as affordable housing units, but they could have gone at market rate. So what we're trying to do, and this is where my disappointment lies, is keep those affordable, be it local preference, workforce housing, within different parameters. You have your 40, 100, 120. Where that did not have to happen, or if the building sits and doesn't sell or whatever happens to it. But I will say that we left a pretty healthy amount back at CPC, am I incorrect? And there's more to come. So I think what we're trying to do with the town and with this building was well within the spirit of what we're trying to do. And from what I understood, and I said this, that we're leaving money that we could use for something good, where there is nothing in the pipeline right now. There's nothing moving.
Yeah.
So that money is just sitting here, taxpayer money, that we are requesting for a justifiable cause, and we're leaving it back for reasons I don't even have a clue on. If they had something up and running that we were holding it back on, I would understand that. But there is nothing out there. So, not that I don't want to compromise and work.
Yeah, and Paul, I'm not suggesting that, you know, we don't ask for something, okay? I mean, it was 1.3 million. Is it 500? Is it 800,000? I don't know. I think I'm firm in my belief that I don't want to have these deed restricted now, because I just think that's bad for the town.
As we all are.
Yeah, so holding firm to that belief, then sometimes you have to,
But what I will say to that, and I don't disagree with it at all,
Yeah.
is that we weren't looking to deed restrict them, but we were looking to take it upon ourselves as a
Right.
town
right,
to euphemistically deed restrict them. Again, to local preference, workforce housing at 2 different rates, 100 and 120, to see what we could do. But it's a work in progress. And again, I'll repeat it. There may be mistakes down the road, but it's done in the right spirit, and I think it's going to work out.
Mr. Creighton?
Yeah, I do think that we need to work this out. I think Reardon's point was well taken, and I agree with him wholeheartedly. The tragedy is we really basically are both on the same side of this, CPC and the select board. We both want as much affordable as we can. We both think that's very attractive and desirable and good public policy. So we agree. The only thing, and this to Ms. Marr's point, is that we're not ready to make that type of restriction. So I think language, and I think, Mr. Reardon could come up with something like that. And we've heard it suggested that language would say, yes, and we're going forward and we will be doing the working together on the affordable, because we both agree. Both boards absolutely unanimously agree. So let's not allow this to devolve into, some kind of argument back and forth, because we all agree.
So might I make a suggestion? I think that this would likely be more productive if One Pleasant Street goes through, if we can put the RFP out, start getting some real numbers to price out the costs. So we have, again, real numbers surrounding these costs. And I would suggest that Springtown meeting is a good time, because that's when we expect to move into the building in March, but we all know the way construction works, so it will probably be, June. And so that will be a good time period for us to look and quantify more specifically the costs of what getting at least the 4 up and running, if not the bigger group up and running as well. And starting off with a CPC request on that front. And as for town meeting, I think we should just, I would suggest we just say, hey, listen, we've heard a lot of feedback, and right now, the CPC and select board think it's the best course of action to withdraw this current recommendation and table it as we get the program stood up, so we can make some decisions as to the cost and potential deed restrictions, but we don't want to restrict the town's flexibility at this current point. And just leave it at that. I don't know how people feel about that, but that could be one approach. Mr. Reardon?
I obviously can't speak for the committee, but my instinct would be that would be a very constructive step forward that allows us to work together to try to achieve the mutual objectives that both boards have in a time frame where we have more information and more time.
And I think we can say to town meeting, I think in a pretty accurate way, that while this will not be money that will be used to defray the acquisition costs, it will be used to defray the ongoing maintenance and property management costs, which will ultimately provide us with more money in rental proceeds at the end of the day. Yes, Mr. Grady.
My only question of that is, so Summer's looking at the bottom line.
Yeah.
All right, so even though it's $40, my taxes are going up, and they're still gonna use my CPC funds. I just want to put that out there. What I'm saying is, I'm just playing devil's advocate for a moment. So if I'm just looking at this warrant, I go to town meeting, I say, all right, well, what's this new twist? All right, not only my taxes going up, even if it's only $40, $25 to $40, but they're also gonna use my CPC funds too, which I'm paying into every year in my taxes, or quarterly, I should say. So people are gonna feel double hit. So I agree with the compromise, I agree with the spirit of it. But again, I have to play devil's advocate on that. So they're gonna get, looking at a tax increase, small as it may be, which what we were using with CPC was to defray that, even in a small way, be it the 4 units. So there's a tax increase coming, and we're still gonna use CPC funds. Yes, we would. We're coming back at it later on,
But that's later on when you deed the units.
after the taxes, after the tax increase is put in.
And we may not need additional units. We may just focus on the 4 because we still don't want to restrict the flexibility on the 9 as we move forward with the program. We may conclude that 100% AMI restriction is really going to inhibit local preference in workforce housing, which I think is it's a reality that I think we're just going to have to face. And so that will be a decision point that we'll have to make. But at least at that point, we'll have more information. Maybe it won't be. Maybe we'll be pleasantly surprised and we'll have a lot of great demand and we'll feel more comfortable, but it's hard to tell right now at this current juncture.
I just want to clarify if at town meeting 2024, if we come back and there's mutual agreement on an amount from CPC towards this project, at that point in time, it can't be used to offset debt. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, if we have not gone to long-term bonds, it could. I mean, if a decision was made, let me just again,
Yeah.
let's say you decide after all the conversations, come spring, we could do 4 more or 2 more, whatever it may be. Let's say it's 2 more. Right? And CPC gives money towards those 2. If it pays down the cost before we go to long-term debt, it could reduce the cost at that time.
Do we have to add To the units, do we have to add 2 more units?
No, I'm just
Oh,
saying,
okay.
I'm just saying CPC seems to be
Hy-
looking for more
hypothetically.
units for more money.
Okay.
So.
But so
and
I
we
just
gotta-
want to go off of what you just said, that we would use the money to offset operating costs for the building. But if we haven't secured the long-term debt, then if CPC in May, if it's approved by the town, the citizens, before we get the bond on the debt, it could offset. Okay,
That's one of the reasons there's not a locked number in the ballot.
okay.
It really does depend.
Because it's up to 8, it says up to 8.1, or
But
up to
it's
whatever.
10.
10, yeah. Okay. I
But
just
it could be
wanted
less.
to
yeah.
clarify that.
The only thing I'm gonna ask is the board formally vote so I can write a motion that has a deferral or a tabling of that one recommendation. If you don't do it tonight, then next Tuesday. It'll just be cleaner to have a motion that goes into town meeting that way. If that's what you decide to do, to table that one piece, it'll just be cleaner.
I'm not voting on
To
that.
make amendments on the floor is always a bit of a dicey thing.
Would anyone like to make a motion to that end? Or do we want to discuss more and something different?
I'll make a motion that we defer the $1.3 million CPC allocation towards One Pleasant Street until town meeting 2024.
Jack or Paul, do you want a second?
Nope.
No,
Second.
I'll second. All right. So we have a motion pending to defer until annual town meeting in 2024. Roll call vote. We'll start with you, Mr. Creighton.
I'm very disappointed. I'm going to vote for this, but I'm really disappointed with CPC. I don't think that they're handling it well, but I will vote to defer.
Okay. Mr. Grady?
I prefer more discussion.
Okay. You mean among us or?
Yes.
What would you like to discuss, Mr. Grady? Is there another option before, well, we've already started voting, but is there,
To defer till 24 town meeting?
yeah,
And how are we gonna spell that out?
we're going to ask Mr. Senior to draft language consistent with the vote.
And you said we could have done this next week, right?
You could do this Tuesday. It just has to be done before the motions are finalized.
So our lawyers have to
What?
draft up motions for town meeting.
Why don't we invite CPC to our Tuesday meeting?
So here's what I'm gonna suggest. I would like to give Mr. Senior some direction so he can work with council, because next Tuesday is our last meeting before town meeting. We have a variety of different projects, including this one, that are out there that I really think we need to prepare for. And we can continue talking about this, but I just wanna, yes.
I'd like to amend the motion.
Okay.
I'd like to amend the motion to instruct the town manager to draft a motion that would defer the CPC allocation of request of 1.3 million to town meeting 2024. So the motion is now just a request for the town manager to draft the motion, not a vote by the board to accept the motion.
So we can see what the language
So we
looks
can
like.
see what the language looks like and then vote on the language on Tuesday.
I'll second that.
Okay. All right, let's do, sorry, Mr. Creighton, we have to do a roll call vote on the amendment. All those in favor present at the senior center, please say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Creighton?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
So now we have the amended motion to direct Mr. Senior to draft up the language for the board. All those in favor at the senior center, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Creighton?
Aye.
Okay. All those opposed? I'm sorry, Mr. Brady, were you
I didn't
opposed?
say anything.
Okay. All right.
That's for the amending for next week, write the amendment. and
Yeah,
then-
that was a motion to direct
Yeah,
Mr.
I
Senior
voted yes
to
for that.
provide us with a proposal. Okay, so Mr. Senior, will you work with Ms. Murray on that?
will.
Attorney Murray? Okay. And I think Mr. Reardon, I think it would make sense too, if you wouldn't mind coordinating with Mr. Senior as well. Mr. Senior, if you could provide Mr. Reardon with a copy as well, and make sure everyone is on the same page as we move forward on this, that would be great. Further discussion?
My hand's been up.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Creighton, I thought it was up previously.
No. Yeah, my suggestion was we could invite CPC to join our meeting on Tuesday and figure out if we have some agreement twice a week for months. So it is a bit of an imposition for them to meet again, but they may want to meet with us, and just a suggestion. It's up to them.
I think Mr. Reardon, were you saying there's a CPC meeting scheduled on Wednesday? Is that right?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So they have a Wednesday meeting notice. but
Tonight
not
and Tuesday.
Okay. 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 Well, would the board like to invite CBC to join, or how are people feeling about that?
I'm happy having the CPC in front of the board.
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Reardon, would the CPC like to join the select board on Tuesday at the beginning of our meeting so we can finalize this issue?
Sure. Well, I mean, I can put the invitation out.
Okay.
That, I don't know, yeah, I mean, we can put that out first thing in the morning.
Okay, great, thank you.
To post.
Yeah, you'll
Yeah.
have, the problem is you'll have to post quickly, and you'll have until noon tomorrow to post.
Tracy, who's sitting there in the back, is
Oh,
dynamite on this kind of thing, so I have no doubt we'll make that deadline.
Okay, so Betsy. Okay,
Thanks, Tracy.
Yeah.
okay,
Thanks, Tom.
Hey,
thank you, Tom.
bad camera.
All right. We are on our next agenda item, which is the stabilization fund policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So on the stabilization fund policies, we
Chris
received,
come back in.
what?
Can Chris come
Oh,
back in?
yes, Chris, thank you, thank you.
I'm just gonna get some water. Do you want some? You have some?
Thank you.
Oh, do you need refill?
No, I'm good, thanks, Alan.
Anyone want it, Chris?
I left mine in the car, my ice water.
Great, perfect. Thank you, Chris. All right, so the policies, I think you all saw, I flipped the email to everyone attaching the edits we received from capital budget. These are their suggested edits. We also sent the policy to our lawyer, including with their edits, to see if there was any suggestions she had. And, excuse me, I think you received a copy of that, flipped that to you as soon as we got it. I have an opinion, but before we begin, are there any questions or discussion the board has or wants to talk about with respect to these policies?
Sorry, I don't want to go first if other people want to speak. I chat a lot.
No, please
Um,
go for it.
One, I would request that these policies are separate. We already have a policy
Yeah.
for roads and sidewalks in terms of private ways, and I think we need to keep the policies separated, okay?
And they ended up editing the earlier version, so
Yeah.
it just, to not explode everyone's brain, I kept
Yeah.
it together. Yeah,
And the other thing is on, most of what the attorney drafted is identical to the red line from capital budget.
so she took the red line and just made changes on top of it, if,
Yeah, I didn't really notice. I didn't have a lot of time
Okay,
But I don't think there were very many changes
no,
from the capital budget changes. I do have a question on the school capital stabilization fund, the bullet points on the bottom, the third one. The last sentence, it says the school fund may also be funded through appropriations from other sources. And I'm not sure if that's legal. There's nothing in the,
yeah, that's a good point. I think they added that in.
yeah, they did, thinking that capital could move from their fund to there, or the schools could move, or free cash could be moved into, or grant money could be moved into, and I don't know if that's legal or not.
Don't think well, certainly the statute allows, I believe, but Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, stabilization funds to be funded through a variety of sources, like the special ed fund. A stabilization fund is funded by free cash, for example. It doesn't necessarily need to be funded by a tax increase. It's just in this instance, that is not the funding mechanism
Yeah.
that we've chosen, right? And so I think maybe we just delete it because this isn't really what is intended through this fund, and it probably just confuses people.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry, Justin.
Just was saying, yeah, there was one hand up. Oh, looks like Mr. Flex has his hand. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, Chris.
But Gene, I didn't want to interrupt if you were finishing your thought.
Nope, please go
Okay.
for it.
Looking through this, the only thought that I have is, and it may be within one of the references to the state general laws, this doesn't clarify who's making the decisions about how the funds are allocated. At least not to my read.
Okay. So according to state law, it would be town meeting. So if you look at, and maybe this is what we need to clarify, if you look at the second paragraph under the title funding source, it says any spending out of the fund must be approved by an annual 2/3 quote appropriation vote at town meeting. And so
Okay.
that's true for both funds.
Thank you.
Sure.
So,
Mr. Reinhouse as well has his hand up when you.
Okay.
sorry, so now that Brian's on, I mean, I think, you know, in reviewing policies and Dr. Schubert and the audience will attest to this, you know, in the school environment, a policy is an overarching indication of where the municipality sits on a particular issue. And then behind that are the operating protocols that support that policy. And I think, you know, I listened as much as I could to capital budget the other night. There are lots of comments and questions about, and that we've had as well, about, well, who's going to make the decision and who picks whether it's, you know, the windows at Deer Hill or, and I'm paraphrasing, or the doors at the middle school or something like that. And to me, those kind of particular questions would follow in an operating protocol as opposed to the policy, because the policy is the overarching concept of what this is. And then you have a document, a live document, because again, this is new for us as a town. You have a live document that says, okay, this is how it's going to work. And it's going to go through the facility department in conjunction with the school department, who's going to present a capital budget. And it's going to go through the normal process as an operating protocol that can get changed. But I feel if you start putting a lot of those details into a policy, it mucks up the policy. So that's all I wanted to say on that.
Mr. Plex, you still have your hand up. Is that intentional? Okay. Mr. Host?
Yes, good evening. I just wanted to clarify two things. First, in the third bullet, the last sentence, the school fund may also be funded through appropriations from other sources. If that's not the intent, then totally understand why you would scratch that. I just wanted to let you know that the research suggested that is an option. But if that's not the intent, then totally understand the move to scratch. With regards to the transfers out, I don't have the current version that came back from council, so I can't see exactly what you're looking at, but the versions that our committee reviewed said in sum and substance that it would follow the procedures set out in the town's bylaws. And those are very clear with regards to capital items. So we were fine with that deferential language.
So you know, Mr. Host, the only edits we got from Ms. Murray, from our attorney Murray, was that with respect to the joint meetings referenced as to both funds, she suggested we qualify that these would be open to the public, which of course they would be under open meeting law. So I think that would be fine.
Absolutely fine. We had changed the word from hearing to meeting because we would rather see a discussion between the committees. And just, I think instinctively, it's that's a discussion that would kick this off, and then these items would go under the traditional review process from there.
Are there any other questions or edits that the board members have? Okay. Okay. So where we are right now on this policy is I did send this to advisory for their review, and they're not meeting this week, they're meeting next week. I also sent it to the school committee chair just to make sure the school committee was read in as well. What I might suggest is that if the select board is inclined, we could vote on the policy, although if something comes up based on feedback we get from advisory or the school committee, which I think is probably unlikely, but if we do get some feedback, we can certainly revisit the policy. That's the beauty of a policy. Unless people have a different approach they want to take.
Make a motion to approve the language.
So Mr. Grady has made a motion to approve the language. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All right, is there any further discussion we want to have?
Yeah, I would prefer to wait to get input, even if there's no change from advisory or school committee. This isn't critical. This isn't on the town warrant for town meeting. There's no time constraints really on these, and out of deference, to our colleagues, I'd prefer to wait.
I see Mr. Host has raised his hand. Would you promote Mr. Host?
Yes,
Mr. Host.
thank you again. I concur with what Ellen has said, but I think it is very important for the capital budget committee to have comfort that everyone is on the same page and that whatever we're voting on at the special town meeting, in fact, reflects a consensus. If there are discrepancies in views as to how these funds are going to be used or how this is going to function, I think that really needs to be aired prior to putting the mechanisms in place. Otherwise, there's really no path to resolution. So I concur that we'd love to hear that advisory and school committee are on the same page. I mean, we didn't draft these policies. We did edit them. The goal was, the goal was to clarify and make sure that the intent was captured clearly and that there was no ability for language to be misread or misconstrued. And the goal was so that someone could pick this up 15 years from now and know exactly what the spirit was when it was drafted and how to use this policy to proceed. So hopefully these are going to be acceptable to advisory in schools, but if they're not, I think it's important to know that prior to STM.
I withdraw my motion.
Well, yeah, Brian, our first draft went to the school committee chair anyways. I think I sent it, and we didn't receive any feedback other than thank you very much for doing this. So I don't really anticipate now any, and in terms of the spirit of the stabilization fund, I feel that we've been very clear with the parties, the school, administration, and the town facilities department and the school committee members in terms of what this fund was for. And not for all of the reasons that have been discussed and not for anything else.
Like I said, I would be surprised if there's significant daylight or edits from advisory or from the school committee. Mr. Hillman, the chair of the advisory committee, and I drafted the policies, including to be in keeping with our existing financial policies. And so the advisory, at least Mr. Hillman was very much a part of that. And I believe that this was on their agenda, I want to say back in early October. But I did want them to have an opportunity to see capitals edits that we just got in the interest of trying to continue collaborating. So I think what you're hearing, Mr. Host, is that everyone is on the same page, whether or not we take a vote. But I do think that, our school committee and advisory colleagues have just gotten these policies and, don't have a meeting this week. So we're not going to be able to get any quote final sign off until they do have a chance to look at them.
So I'd amend my motion, make a motion to wait till we hear from all committees.
Okay. Or we can just wait.
Yeah.
We can just
Wait, so I don't have to file a motion. so-
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
thank you.
But Mr. Host, if it makes capital feel better or give you more comfort, is there anyone on the select board that has any issues with the policies that they want to raise right now? Okay,
No, I
okay.
do not.
I'm not seeing any select board members indicating any issues with the policies. Yes, Mr. Host.
Would you be willing to request that the advisory committee and the school committee review these next week and, either provide comments or approve them as is so that capital budget can do the same?
Already done, Mr. Host. I
Okay.
have requested that advisory do that. It is a request, and that is all the select board can do with our colleagues. Likewise, with the school committee, I have provided it to Mr. Dial as well. And at this point, it's up to them, but that's where we are. So again, I think everyone is on the same page. Everyone sees your edits. Everyone, I think, is having the same understanding as to what these funds are and what they do. And we appreciate the edits from Capital. I think they made the policy more clear. So I thank you all for that. And I think that's where we are. I think we're just going to wait for other colleagues.
I was just looking to see, I think school committee is meeting Wednesday.
Yeah, I
It's the
think
first
next
Wednesday. They meet the first and third Wednesday of the month.
Yep.
And so by town meeting, everyone will have weighed in and we can say that the policies have been vetted and approved by all boards and committees. Oh, they actually met last night. Oh,
Okay. All right. So yes, this will likely be something that we probably won't know until the night of town meeting if the remainder of our, the committees have weighed in. Okay. Unless there's any further discussion on that, I think all we have left right now is select board comments. Oh, sorry.
Could you vote? I know they're kind of linked. Could you vote the road part of it that allow the capital budget committee to at least move on the road stabilization fund? Because the school committee doesn't have any input on that one. And advisory is effectively already said go, and they're going to be Wednesday anyway. I don't know if that would help in any way. I'm just.
I suppose we could vote, but it strikes me the board wants to wait to hear from the other committees, like school and advisory. But again, I think what you're hearing is that everyone is in agreement and fine with the policies. We're just waiting for the others to review.
It's on the agenda for the Iowa Town meeting.
Yep. Okay. All right. We're at select board comments at this point, unless there's any remaining thought on stabilization fund policies? Nope. Okay. Mr. Plex, do you have any comments?
Just briefly, wanted to express my gratitude to the entire town for a safe and fun Halloween for all the kids.
Mr. Creighton?
I'd just like to reiterate that the select board remains committed to using the town hall as an opportunity to increase our affordable workplace and housing for seniors. So, and I'm really look forward to working with CPC and when we join them on Tuesday. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Marr?
Seems like a while ago, but I did go to the Rotary Club. I was invited to speak on our articles and our projects, and very well received, lots of questions, but overall very well received. And I'll just put a plug in. The Rotary Club is always looking for new members. It's a worthwhile organization, service before self. And they are, I don't want to break the news, but they're dropping production of the Cohasset phone book, paper phone book, and the road race will be their only major event. Yeah, I know, I'm saving my copies, but yeah, it's just, it's become too unmanageable. And I would strongly encourage anyone who wants to get involved. It's a great organization, very interesting speakers twice a month, and they were in support.
The hat and a handshake?
I didn't get a hat because I'm not a hat girl.
No special handshake?
There's no special handshake, no.
Mr. Grady?
I would second Mr. Plex's comment, and I will say that up at the fields and at the dump, it's nice to see that people are getting engaged, and they actually seem very positive about these initiatives. So anybody who has time, just keep doing it. Get up with papers. I mean, I had some great receipt on Saturday. And anticipate the same thing at the dump this week. So let's just keep up good work, because the town seems to be listening, which is a really positive thing.
So I did go to the RTF this weekend for a few hours. And the cheerleaders definitely got the better spot because I was next to the bees, which were very annoying. But I think that people had a lot of questions. There were some positives. There were some people who were not in support. There was a variety of views. I think what jumped out to me the most is there was one individual that asked a lot of questions and then said he was in full support, and then said he's lived in Cohasset for, and I'm not going to say the year for fear of outing him, but he was asking me about affordable housing and, wanting to be in one of the units. So I think it shows, a strong demand, even in my non-statistically significant sample of, people who are at the RTF for that limited time period, that there really is a need within Cohasset, and we just have to keep pushing to make the project come to fruition. And I would also offer my thanks to Mr. Joyce and Mr. Senior for pushing hard to get Elm Street and its sidewalks paved for Halloween. I enjoyed walking on the fresh pavement with my children and not in a bunch of minefields. So thank you for that. There was tons of kids out and it was much safer, and the project is getting done. So thank you to Paul and the Roads and Sidewalk Committee for also pushing to have that work complete. So
Should have come down my street.
that's all for now. All right, so we do not have any topics not reasonably anticipated. No one has anything? Okay.
I make a motion to adjourn.
All right.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those present at the senior center, please vote aye.
Aye.
Aye, if that's what you feel. Mr. Plex?
Aye.
Mr. Creighton?
Aye.
All right, this meeting is adjourned.